Hello and welcome to Relatable Code. In this video, I want to take you on a tour through IntelliJ so that you can get familiar with the IDE that you will be working on. Okay, so this is IntelliJ. If you haven't installed it yet, please watch my previous video where we set up and install it along with the JDK as well. So let's try to create a new project now. We click on the new project button. Let's give it any name. Very creative. I think it has to be a single word. Okay. Leave that location at default. Leave that unchecked for now. We will leave the language at Kotlin. We will use the build system Gradle. That's right. And for the JDK, we will select JDK 20, the one we downloaded in the previous video. Gradle DSL, let's leave that at, we can use either Kotlin or Groovy, it doesn't matter. Add sample code, let's leave that checked, and let's create this project. Okay, so now it's going to compile. You might find something different between my IntelliJ and yours. It might be the dark mode that I'm using. I'll show you how I set the dark mode. You go to File. I think the project's compiled. Still compiling. You go to File, you go to Settings, and here in Appearance you can choose the theme that you want. I chose Darkula, which is the dark mode. You can choose IntelliJ Light. I really hate that light. I prefer to choose dark, and me and most developers actually. You'll find that out when you start working, or if you already do work, you would already know that. What else can you change? You can use a custom font for the IDE. Look at the size of the main.kt label, for example. It's at 12 right now. If I were to use 16 and click on apply, that would zoom it in. Okay, different people have different preferences. I'll just leave that at 12. I'm just showing you what you can do to modify your IntelliJ. And there's a lot of other stuff you can do as well. I'm not going to go through all of those settings. I'll just show you the ones that we might work with in the future, such as the key map, for example. In this key map, we might provide some shortcuts in the future when we want to work with our code. What else? Let's see here. I think that's it for now. In editor also, you can go to editor, to code editing. You can choose any settings that you want. I think there was something here, yes, in code style. You can go to code style, you can go to Kotlin. I think, yes, you can play around with the indentation of your code. Now the indentation is 4. If I were to choose 6, that would further indent it. Okay, let's just leave that at 4 and click on apply and hit on OK. That's the settings page. There's another settings page, or something close to it, which we call the project structure. That's the settings page for our certain project. Okay, the settings page that we were checking out was the settings for IntelliJ in general. These are settings that are exclusive to your project. Okay, such as your project name, the JDK that your project is using, language level. I think that's related to the Java version. We're using 11. And lots of other stuff we can find here. Okay, I will also not go through all that because you will not need to know that for now. At least let's leave those at default. And let's get into the structure of your project in IntelliJ. Okay, that would be the left window under the project section. Okay, so let's start with the main.kt file. KT stands for Kotlin. And this is the file where we will write our Kotlin code in the future. It doesn't appear on this left menu. What we can do is we can click on this button select open file, and what it does is basically shows you where the file is uh, in your menu. Okay, that's a very handy feature. So our main.kotlin file is located in this directory. Okay, you go to src, then the main folder, then the Kotlin folder, then the main.kt folder. Okay, so this is where we will write our Kotlin code in the future. And with respect to resources, we might not use them a lot in this tutorial, but that's basically where we will store images or configurations, for example. Okay. So moving on, I want to talk to you about the .idea folder in your project. This is a folder where you will not modify the files or anything. I just want to give you a general explanation of what it is. This is the folder where your settings or preferences for this project are stored. Okay. We saw a little while ago when we went to the settings that we can change, for example, the indentation. Stuff like that are saved into the idea folder. Okay, it could be the indentation, it could be, for example, shortcuts that we're using in this project, but that's stuff that's managed by IntelliJ on its own. Okay, so you don't need to know what's in these files because they're created and managed by IntelliJ as well. Okay, that's it for the .idea folder. Next, we're going to talk about the external libraries. You can think of these as like a toolbox that contains a lot of tools that you can use to help you build your project faster. In this case, the tools are pieces of code. Let's take, for example, you're trying to build a house. Okay? You can make your own hammer, you can make your own saw, you can make your own nails as well, but that would take a lot of time. So you go to the shop and you buy these tools so that you can build your house faster. And that's exactly why we have external libraries. Okay, you might find code, for example, that helps you out with dates. Okay, handling dates and time zones. For example, a certain date, like day, month, year, which I want to convert to another format, like month, day, year, to use in my code. Okay, stuff like that that would make building your application a lot faster. We really need them and they're really essential. Okay, and now the fun part begins because we're going to talk about Gradle. Gradle is like that master builder for your project. Okay, it's a master builder which you can give instructions to so that it can help you compile your code, which means translating your human readable code to some computer readable code so that it can be executed. Okay, that's a really important step. It can help you with the packaging of your application. This whole application can get converted to a single file by Gradle, which can later be used to be distributed, for example, between developers. Okay, Gradle can also help you, for example, manage your dependencies. What are dependencies? They're like the different tools that you will use in your project to help you build your project faster. Okay, that's another advantage, and it also helps you write tests for your code to make sure that your code runs efficiently. It's a very efficient and a very smart tool that we're going to use, and it will help us save a lot of time in the future. Because when we're building our project, sometimes there are certain files that take time to generate. If Gradle already generated those files, sometimes it can skip them, which provides a huge advantage in build times. Okay, so instead of your project taking, for example, 5 minutes to build each time, it would take maybe half a minute, maybe a minute, thanks to Gradle and its efficient processing power. Okay, so we're going to dive deep into every single file that Gradle uses in the project. We're going to start with the build.gradle.kts file. Okay, we'll explain these step by step. At the top of this file, you will find the plugins block of code. Okay, plugins are like extra capabilities and commands for your Gradle. Let's see what they will help us with here. This first line of code, Kotlin JVM version 1.8.21, tells Gradle how to handle your Kotlin code. Okay, so if you're going to use Kotlin in your project, you need to have this plugin. Okay, and the application part of this plugin's block of code will be to teach Gradle how to run your application. Deal? With respect to group and version, don't concern yourselves with these yet. You will use these, for example, when you want to distribute your application to use in another project. If you have certain tools that can be of use in another project, you might use these too. But for now, let's ignore them. Repositories. Repositories are like the stores where you will find the tools you will need for your project. Okay, so Maven Central is a huge store. It has a lot of tools, and one of these tools is this. One of the dependencies we're using in this project. A dependency is basically a tool that you will use to run your code and build your application faster. Okay, you can find this dependency, of course, in this repository or shop in our example. Okay, I think this dependency is just for using test classes. We will not concern ourselves right now with test classes. That's an advanced topic. But basically use test classes to make sure your code is working properly. Okay, that's another block concerned with tests, using the JUnit tool to perform your tests. We will not look into this right now. With respect to this Kotlin block of code, it contains JVM toolchain. This basically tells Gradle to run Kotlin based on the Java JDK version 11. Okay, Kotlin in general runs on the Java platform. Java is just another programming language you can consider, but it's a lot older than Kotlin. Okay, you can say that Kotlin is based on Java. So that's what this code does. And with respect to the application block of code, this basically tells Gradle that the application, our main application, can be run in this file. Where can we find this file? That's our main.kt file that we discussed earlier. Okay, so that will be the main entry point of our application, where if we run this file, we run our application. Okay, that's in short the build.gradle.kts file. Now let's move to another. It's worth noting before moving on to the next section that even though we're using JDK 20 in our project as specified here, we're using JDK 11 to run our Kotlin code on. These two JDKs don't have to be the same. Okay, this JDK is just the Java version that your Kotlin code is running on, while the JDK 20 that we specified in this project is for the IDE in general. It may contain certain features like certain code completion, code inspection, code highlighting, any features that can help you in the development of your project. But in the end, your Kotlin code will run on the JDK version specified here in the JVM toolchain. Okay? So now we're going to talk about the Gradle.properties file. This is basically self-explanatory. It's basically the properties that you're giving to Gradle. In this case, we're using the kotlin.code.style property and we're setting it to official. What this means is that we're using the official guidelines and standards for styling and organizing our Kotlin code. Okay, this might be an indentation and this might be in other stuff such as, for example, maybe the brackets in our code. Okay, these are the brackets, the closing bracket and the opening bracket. These are just examples. Okay, in this .properties file you can specify, for example, how many gigabytes of RAM you want to give to Gradle to compile your project, where higher numbers mean better compilation. Okay, and you can define lots of other properties as well. We might go into more detail in this in the future. For now, let's check out another file, another quick file, the settings.gradle.kts file. It's just a file that contains the name of our root project. In this example, new project. Okay, that's it. We don't have anything else for now in this file. Let's move on to another file. Let's talk about the Gradle wrapper properties file. You can find this file here under the Gradle folder and the wrapper folder. We're going to start off with the properties file. You don't need to concern yourself with the distribution base and path variables or the zip store or path variables. This is the most important piece of information in this file because this is the version of Gradle that you're using in the project. Okay, this makes sure that you're compiling your project with this version of Gradle. So even if other developers are working on the same project, this provides a sort of unity between you and other developers to use the same version. With respect to the .jar file, you can think of it as a tiny self-contained program that runs Gradle itself and makes sure that it's using this version of Gradle. If it's not installed on your system, it will install it for you and use it. Okay, so that's what these two files do, and let's move on to another file. Okay, so now I want to talk to you about the Gradle W and the Gradle W.bat files. Now, they might seem like really big files, which they are, but I'm going to simplify them a lot. So basically, when you compile your project with Gradle, these files are automatically generated. They're called Gradle wrapper scripts. Okay, and their job is to ensure that anyone can build your project using the correct version of Gradle. So imagine you have a complicated toy and you want to give it to someone. Okay, so you give it to someone and you give that person a toolkit which will help them to build the toy. No matter where they are, they can access that toolkit and they can build that toy exactly the same way that you can build it. That's basically the responsibilities of the Gradle W and the Gradle W.bat files. Moving on, we just have two more folders to talk about. The first of which is the build folder. If you don't have this folder yet in your project, it means you haven't built your application yet. You build that application like we did in the previous video. You navigate to your main.kt file located in this package. You check the green play button at the top left here. You click on it and you just click on run main kt. We clicked on that, our application has run, and now you will see this build folder generated. So it pretty much is a build folder that's generated when you build your project. Okay, you don't need to know much about that other than this. Okay, that's the class that we use to build the project. This is where it's contained, so it's like an output that you can see after you build your project. That's the build folder. What's the .gradle folder and what's the difference between .gradle and Gradle? This .gradle folder is generated by Gradle because, as we've previously discussed as well, Gradle is very efficient and a very powerful tool. So when it builds a project once, it doesn't take the same time to build it again. It sometimes caches certain things in our project so that they can become easier to build at a later time. Cache means like save locally. Okay, so instead of the project taking 5 minutes to build every time, it would take generally less and less time every time we build the project, because Gradle is saving some certain properties about our project that it doesn't need to calculate again. And that's it for the .gradle file. So that was a really long video. I try my best to avoid videos that are too long so that they don't seem intimidating. But in all honesty, we did a complete tour of the IntelliJ IDE because I want you to be very familiar with the tool that you're using, and I just want you to know how everything is working behind the scenes. You know, that's the approach that I like to use, and I hope you found this video helpful. If you like what you see in this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for future content, and I'll see you in the next video.